Now we get to move on. So we're graduating from 1-point perspective to something even harder, which is called 2-point perspective. So the first thing I want you to do is start off with a 9x12 sheet of paper, or just a standard size letter size paper. And you can see I have the paper arranged so it's horizontal or in landscape mode. The first thing that I want you to do is to kind of go towards the middle of your paper, and you're going to be drawing a rectangle. So the rectangle should measure 4 inches by 6 inches. So that's what I'm doing there. I actually measured from the edge of the paper to make sure that it was even on both sides. I think I went 3 inches from the edge of the paper towards the center. And then I'm measuring that frame, that border of 4 by 6 inches. So naturally, there is a reason why you're making this rectangle frame float in the paper, and it's so that we can do 2 points that are actually off the page, because I think it can really distort the image if you try putting them on the page personally. So I'm going to show you this method. So we're first actually going to begin same way that we always start off with, is with a horizon line. So you can see I'm going to a little bit actually below the bottom third and drawing in a horizon line. And I'm just going to extend the horizon line beyond the borders of that rectangle on either side. So you can see I'm using a longer ruler to do that. And after this, you want to go light with your lines. I'd say it's okay to go heavy on your frame, but after this, go light on your lines. I'd even recommend doing light for your horizon. So that is going to be one of your vanishing points. And you can see it's directly on that horizon line. And then there's the other one, which is almost off the paper there. So the one on the left, I'm going to number with a number 1. The one on the right, I'm going to number 2. I know, not very inventive, huh? But it does help to make sure there's a clear distinction between that first one on the left and the second one on the right. Okay, so I am going to be putting in a vertical line, and that line is a little bit closer to the right side of that rectangular frame that we've made, and that line dips below the horizon line, but more of the line is up on the top. And I think I measured it at like about 1.5 inches. But I'm not looking for you to copy it exactly unless you really want to. So that's our first vertical line. To start any 2-point perspective, you have to begin with a vertical line. So this is going to be the edge or corner of the building. And next we're going to be taking our line. So I'm going to the bottom of the line, and I'm aligning it up to vanishing point number 2. So I took the bottom there and aligned it with point 2. In a moment, I'm going to do the same thing to the top of that line and also angle it to point 2. And again, lightly is important because you're going to be erasing a lot of these lines. Okay, so now I'm going to the bottom of that line again, only this time I'm angling it back to point 1. So you can see I'm like trying to get my pencil point on that point to make sure it's lined up. And there we go. So the bottom of that line connecting to vanishing point 1 there. And then I'm going to do the same thing to the top. So you can see there's kind of a pattern there that both the top and bottom on the left side connect to point 1, and on the right side they connect up to point 2. So this will become the structure for the house. Right now it's going back to infinity, and we're going to be addressing that in just a moment. Okay, so now I'm going to close off the side of the house. So I'm just going to take my pencil and do a parallel line there. So that closes off the right side of the house. I'm going to do the same thing to the left side. And I looked at the photograph, and the right side, the right wall, is a little bit smaller than the left wall. So I'm going to keep that in mind and make my left wall a little bit longer than the right. I've started to erase the lines behind that wall just so I don't start to get confused. I'm also erasing the horizon line where it goes through that wall there. So our next job is to close off that left side and to make essentially a cube. So again, I'm going with a vertical angle, making sure it's parallel to that first line that we drew. And I'm going to go ahead and place that line. There we go. And then I'm going to erase those lines that are going back to the vanishing points. I don't need those anymore. You can see you have a cube there. Next, I'm going to the roof line. So the roof extends a little bit beyond the house, which is a little bit tricky to do. And there's a kind of like the gutter or the eave that's up there, so I'm making kind of a double line and closing that off. I actually think that the roof is the hardest part of this drawing. I'm doing the same thing to the other side, lining it up to vanishing point number 2 there just to make a double line. And then I have to close off that eave by going to point 1. This is where it starts to get a little bit confusing, trying to figure out which angle belongs to which point. All right, so to draw the roof angle, this was the hardest thing. And I don't know of a perspective trick to do it. What I was doing is sighting the angle. So I would hold my pencil up against the angle and I would transfer it over. So I was doing a technique called angular transfer. So I just looked really closely and observed and transferred that angle. So to me, that it looks like kind of like a triangle shape, but it's not a perfect triangle. It's short on one side. Like each length of the triangle is different, or each side of the triangle is a different length. And you may need to play around with it. I certainly spent time adjusting it. In fact, it looks like that's what I'm doing there. I'm just adjusting that angle a little bit. And just so you know, art's about that. It's about looking at something and readjusting and making corrections to it. Okay, so here's our little cube with a cute little roof on top. I'm getting in that white stripe that's just below the roof line. There's like a white stripe there. It's probably decorative, but I got that in there. And I'm doing that by going to that vanishing point number 1. So right now I'm trying to get in the windows. And here's how it works. Everything that's on the left facing side, that left wall, needs to go back to that left vanishing point, or point number 1. Unless it's a vertical line. Vertical lines stay pure vertical. And you want to make sure that they are perfectly straight and not angled lines. So to get those windows, the top line on the window goes back to vanishing point 1. So does the bottom line of the window. And I start out with very simple windows. They start out as rectangles. And keep in mind that the window closest to the viewer should be a hair bigger than the one that is farther away. And then there's that little porchway that's really fun, that it would make it really exciting to paint because it's not just a flat face. It goes in, there's a little porch there. So I'm drawing that. It's basically a rectangle that I'm drawing. Except for the top line does go back to the vanishing point. That side line is a perfect vertical. And I realized that I needed to erase the horizon line where it's going through the building on that side. So you can see it's starting to have more of a building-like shape. And that part was tricky because you can see a little bit of the back wall there. There's a little front wall and then there's a back wall in that area. It's this cute little like cut out porch. So I'm getting ready to get in that additional set of windows that is just below the top set. And I'm using the vanishing point there to get the top and bottom line. And then I'm getting those two parallel vertical lines to kind of close off that shape there. And again, I'm still trying to go light with my pencil because not everything's perfect at this stage. And I'm getting in like the division between the windows, and I'm going to get the frames in there. To do the frames, I have to do the same thing. I have to go back to the vanishing point. So you can see that this is kind of labor intensive because you're not only doing it to one side, you're going to do it to the other side as well. I mean, it could be worse. You could do a whole city block. Some teachers do that. I think it's better just to start off with something more easy to do and achieve. I've sped this up. That way you don't have to sit there watching, but I'm putting the trim on the windows. So it's kind of a repeat of what you already did. But you do have to angle back to that vanishing point number 1 if you're trying to get like the midway line on the windows. And then we're going to move on to the other side in just a moment. Oh yeah, there's that little roof that kind of pops out. I would do that if you want to challenge yourself. If you don't, then you don't necessarily have to do it. There are some of you who should do that little pop out roof, though. All right, so I'm going to show you the next part, slow it down a little bit because we're moving to the opposite side. It is kind of a repeat of what we did to the left, only I want to make sure that you're going to that point number 2, the one on the right. So I just drew that white stripe that's at the top near the roof, and I'm getting the windows in there right now. And this is drawn in real time, so I'm not speeding it up at all. But just remember that the window that is closer to you should be a little bit bigger. The one that is farther away should be a little bit smaller and skinnier. There's also this little complicated porch on that side, which I'm going to omit because I know that would take a lot of time and I don't want to add any confusion. I want to make it a little bit simpler. But I am going to put in a couple of windows down there instead. I think there are some windows there anyway, but the little porchy thing is blocking. So kind of same deal where the top and the bottom go to point 2. The sides, the vertical sides, stay true vertical. They have to be parallel and they have to be straight vertical lines there. The dividing lines to divide the window in half, kind of horizontally, have to also go back to that vanishing point number 2. You can see why I like using a ruler that's clear like that, because they can better gauge how thick or how thin my lines are turning out. I know that trim is a lot of work. So the bulk of the house is pretty much done. I'm going to put in that little stairway. I'm probably going to simplify it though. That's the road. So that line that I just drew there going to vanishing point 1, that's the kind of the slash of the road in the foreground. Remember, foreground means front. And the house itself is occupying the middle ground for the most part. The trees are going to be what's in the background. So those are the angled lines, the railing on the porch there. And then the steps go back to vanishing point number 1. And I'm just going to make them simple, and I'm not going for perfection. Kind of looks like a haunted Victorian house. So I was pivoting there off of vanishing point number 1 to get those steps. And now I'm speed lapsing this, but that's where you get in all the trees and foliage. It doesn't necessarily have to be perfect. Remember, trees are organic shapes, but you should give it some kind of context. So it's in an environment, so the house isn't just by itself.